Well, hi guys, it's Mr. Schauber, and in this presentation, I briefly want to go over with you some of the leaders of some of the major key nations in World War II. Um, some interesting figures that we're dealing with when we talk about this subject. Adolf Hitler, of course, was the dictator of Germany from 1933 to 1945. We've already talked about him, but he was born and raised in Austria. He had fought in World War I on the side of Germany and Austria. That war left him bitter and with wanting vengeance against France and England and the other allies of the world, the people that had been allies in World War One. After he got home, of course, he helps uh, with the growth of the Nazi Party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, and he ascends to the top of that party. His enigmatic, magnetizing personality. He was, lent itself to him getting a large following, and people liked what he had to say. He was a very good speaker in a lot of ways. He drew people in, and of course, the message was anti-establishment, and we're going to change how things are done in this country. We're going to make Germany. We're going to help it return to its glory days, and we're going to just make it amazing and awesome. And so, when people are, and Germany was in a huge depression. So when people don't have jobs and don't have enough food and things like that, they're looking for something to change their fortunes. Once he gets into power, he sets up what he calls his Third Reich. This is an empire. He wants to last 1,000 years. Well, you can see above it lasted 12, but that was his intention, was 1,000-year empire. He assumed the title Der Führer, which means the leader, and don't think that everybody loved him, because plenty of people saw through him and tried to get rid of him. He survived more than 15 assassination attempts as the Fuhrer, and reportedly died in his bunker on April 30th, 1945. But the question has come up and remained for many, many years: did he really die there, or did he somehow escape that bunker and go somewhere else to live out his life? Whether, who knows, if he did do that, then did his life uh, last a long time, a short time? No one knows. No one knows the answers exactly. Most historians think he died in his bunker, but evidence has come up in recent years that maybe he escaped. So we may never know the answer to that question definitively, but uh, that's the short of it. Benito Mussolini was the fascist dictator of Italy. He ruled from 1922 to 1943. He had assumed the title of Il Duce, and he became an ally of Hitler and Germany in World War II. He was removed from power in 1943 when Italy and the Axis powers started losing the war, and he became increasingly unpopular with his own people in Italy. He was captured while trying to flee to Switzerland in 1945, and he was executed by firing squad by his own people. His body was taken to Milan and put on public display. Uh, he was, as a symbol that he had been disgraced, and that he was, not in good favor with the people, obviously, any longer. So he was a brute, just like Hitler and Stalin and some of these other guys that were bad guys. He was a brute, and he believed in ruling with an iron fist. And most dictators do that. That's why they have the term dictator attached to their names. That is Mussolini. Francisco Franco, military dictator of Spain from 1939 to 1975. He took over as a result of the Spanish Civil War that happened just before his reign started. And he was also an ally of Germany and Italy in World War II. He was not officially part of the Axis powers, but being an ally, uh, especially after the war, he harbored and protected many Nazis fleeing Germany and coming through Spain and like I said, he protected them. So he didn't turn them over to authorities or anything like that. He said, hey, you want to get out of Germany before they catch you? You want to get out of Italy before they catch you? You come through Spain, and I'll make sure you're safe. And so he wasn't the best guy either, obviously, but that's kind of the short of Francisco Franco. General Hideki Tojo was the Prime Minister of Japan when during World War II, and he was the guy who really wanted to go to war with the United States. He thought that if Japan could surprise attack us at Pearl Harbor and win a decisive victory, that we would somehow be disheartened and give up and surrender. And of course, that was not going to happen, and it didn't happen. But that was his, ill-conceived opinion, and like I said, it had the opposite effect. It just made us really mad, and so we went after them with a vengeance. But Hideki Tojo was kind of a warmonger. He liked the idea of going to war with the U.S. He saw all the resources that we had and had access to, and he wanted those. So that is Hideki Tojo. Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II. Uh, he was a great inspiration to the British people and to the Allies. Of course, after the Battle of Britain, or even before the Battle of Britain, during the Battle of Britain, after the Battle of Britain, when Hitler's Luftwaffe just tried to bomb England into submission, he repeatedly said, "We will never surrender. We'll fight everywhere. We'll fight on the beaches. We're not going to give up." And Britain was battered after that. Um, after that Battle of Britain. The German Air Force did a number on them, but they did not surrender, and Churchill stayed strong and kept the British people strong. Franklin D. Roosevelt was our president during most of World War II. The 32nd president of the United States, he served from 1933 to 1945. He is the only president to serve more than 2 consecutive terms. Um, he got elected 4 times. There was no law back then about serving just twice, and so he said, "Well, I keep winning, so I'm going to keep running." And he led us through most of the Great Depression and most of World War II. He passed away right at the end of World War II in April of 1945, and his vice president, Harry Truman, who we will talk about, took over as president to finish the war. Joseph Stalin, born, and you'll have to excuse my Russian, Yosif Zhugashvili, dictator of the Soviet Union. He took over after the death of Vladimir Lenin, who had introduced communism to Russia. He is one of history's biggest mass murderers. Died in 1953, and he was like Hitler. They're cut from the same cloth. Paranoid, always worried about the people around them, trying to get rid of them and take over their power. He was brutal. If you looked at him sideways, he would send you off to a work camp, called the gulags, and he had people executed. He starved people out. Millions and millions of people, of mainly Russians, his own people, and the people that were under the control of the Soviet Union, perished at his hands. He is one of the bad guys, definitely, in history. He has some famous quotes attributed to him. This first one's classic. He says, "It is enough that the people know that there was an election. The people who cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything." So you can see how what he thought about elections. He says the only real power comes out of a long rifle. And he says education is a weapon whose effect depends on who holds it in his hands and at whom it is aimed. And boy, isn't that true, right? Education can enlighten us, or can really turn us sideways and really corrupt us. So it depends on what we're learning and who we're learning it from, and what the agenda is of the person who's teaching us. So anyway, that is Joseph Stalin. Harry S. Truman, the 33rd U.S. president. He served from 1945 to 53. He led the U.S. at the very end of World War II. Very, very end. After Roosevelt passed away. He made the decision to drop the atomic bomb on Japan, or the two bombs actually, to end the war. And in this picture I wrote up there, he is announcing Japan's surrender to the United States at the end of World War II. Uh, he would go on to serve two more terms after just his few months finishing the war, and he will lead us into the early 50s and through the first few years of the Cold War after World War II. Juan Peron was the military dictator of Argentina from 1946 to 55, and he was also president from 1973 until his death in 1974, for that brief period. His wife, Eva Peron, they made a movie kind of about her called Evita, and why do I have the dictator of Argentina on here? Well, what happened was after World War II and right at the end of World War II, a lot of Germans who were Nazis and knew that Germany was going to lose the war, and when they did, these Nazis would be hunted down and captured for their war crimes against humanity. A lot of them tried to flee Germany. A few stayed, but a lot of them tried to leave. And when they left, oftentimes they would go through Spain because Franco was friendly to them and would protect them. And then they would try to cross the Atlantic and come over to South America. And a lot of them ended up in Argentina, and some in Paraguay, and some in Brazil, and some over into Chile and places like that. But why would they go there? Well, there were large German colonies in certain places in those countries already from before World War II. Germans had moved over to South America well before World War II and established colonies there, oftentimes only speaking German and continuing on with German customs and culture. And so these Nazis knew they could find, if they could get to these colonies, they would be safe there most of the time because the German people that lived there in those colonies weren't going to turn them in. And so Argentina became a hotbed for this, and Juan Perón was friendly to Nazis escaping to Argentina, and he let them live there without any repercussions. And so that's why I have him on this list.